Hey, why set up an LLC when all I can do is buy insurance? It's much cheaper and easier. Have you heard that before? Well, a lot of attorneys will tell you that. That's why in this video, we are going to discuss, do you need an LLC for your real estate investing? Okay, let's get started. All right, so here's the thing that comes up an awful lot. I'll be talking to a real estate investor and they have 5 or 6 properties. And they'll push back on me when I tell them they should set up a limited liability company for each of those properties. And they'll say this: well, I spoke to my local attorney and he said it's just too complicated to create an LLC. It's going to be expensive to maintain the limited liability company. And I'm much better off just buying insurance and forgetting about the entire structure altogether. What do you think? Well, you know what I'm going to say. Is that an attorney and a real estate investor? Because if they are, they're way out of line here. That is not true. In using limited liability companies, yes, you're still going to have insurance, but they protect you against things that insurance does not protect you against. More importantly, when you create these structures, it's more than about just asset protection. It's also about planning, tax planning, business planning. Because you know the way I think on this, that real estate investing, you got to look at it like a business, because that's what it is. If you're going to find success, you need to take that business mindset to it. So without those LLCs, if you own property in your own name, it's all going to flow down on your 1040 Schedule E, and they're all going to get listed out there. So anyone who looks at your tax return, namely underwriters, they know you invest. Now, the problem with putting all those properties on your Schedule E, page 1, is it could blow up your 1040, make it much more thick, or many more pages there, so it's harder to get a loan through. But worse yet, it can mess up your debt to income ratio, because you won't get full credit for all of your income, because they want to do a holdback for vacancies. Now that happens to a lot of real estate investors, and they wonder why their investing taps out, and it's because of the way their tax returns work. But if they're using LLCs, then we can change how that information hits a return, set it up as a partnership, bring it down via K1, and get you 100% for the income and no holdbacks for potential vacancies, because it's how the underwriter has to look at the return for evaluating your loan. It's one of those things that if you're an experienced real estate investor, you treat it as a business, you get it. But what about the insurance context? I kind of went a little off there on that. Here's what it comes down to. Yes, you still need insurance when a property is held in an LLC, but there are several things insurance does not cover, and people buy insurance thinking they're fully protected, not appreciating the risk that comes with owning real estate. Let me give you a few of these. All right, environmental concerns. So if you have a property, one of the main concerns you're going to have is going to be toxic mold. All right, so this is an issue that we have in properties, a sick property with toxic mold. Now, I have plenty of clients that have dealt with this already. Attorneys come after them. They say that the tenants have experienced respiratory issues because there's mold in the property. Well, there's mold in all properties if you know where to look, if there's some moisture around. But attorneys will tell you it's toxic if they can get a few dimes for their client. But the thing about it is your insurance has an exclusion in your policy that states it will not protect you when there's an environmental contaminant, which toxic mold would fall under. So that's a problem. How about COVID? Right? If you read the newspapers, you know, COVID is another issue that we have out there. So that's not going to be covered under your policy. So if a tenant says, oh, it's a sick building, or you send out someone to go out and do some work on the property, they contract COVID from the individual that's coming out to the property. So your tenant contracts it, or maybe the worker goes out there, he contracts it from a tenant. And so then you can be sued that way. Other issues that we have, let's assume that you reduced rent. So my father used to do this on occasion. He would provide the tenant reduced rent in exchange for services. So if they said, all right, if you do this, this, and this on the property, then I'll reduce your rent by half. Now that's not uncommon. People do that a lot with their properties. But here's the issue. When you engage in that type of scenario, you're going to void your policy with any claims that they bring against you, because now they're treated as an employee of yours, because you're compensating them for services they're performing on the property, and they're not licensed, so you're not covered. The other issue we have with that insurance does not cover: extended absence. Okay, so what do we mean by that? extended absence of not having a renter in the property. So let's assume that your prior renters just trash the property and they move out. And so now you start the rehab on the property. And this rehab project, because materials are hard to find right now, takes you 75 days, 90 days to get the property fully rehabbed. So during that time frame, look in your policy, see if any harm that occurs on the property past 30 days without a tenant is covered. Many policies do not cover certain damages that happen to individuals on the property if the property is vacant for more than 30 days. And so people that buy these policies are shocked to learn that when they're in the middle of this rehab project, somebody gets hurt, somebody sues, that they have no coverage. And they thought, well, I was covered, but the property was vacant for more than 30 days, therefore you're not. And so that's a concern that I have. You're not covered under default. So what do I mean by that? Whenever you take out a loan, what do? You sign a personal guarantee on a lot of loans. So residential loans, a lot of times are going to require personal guarantees. Well, let's say that the property you own is upside down now because property values have declined in a particular area. You don't have enough rent to cover the mortgage any longer. Maybe you just can't even get tenants in that area because they don't qualify. And so you're sitting on this property, you're bleeding out. Maybe it's even an Airbnb, and you're thinking, I just got to get up from underneath it. And you want to walk away. But you don't walk away because your concern is that they'll come after you for a deficiency judgment. Well, insurance is not designed to cover that scenario, is it? So if you base your entire strategy on insurance and you ever have a loan default, you're on your own and you're not going to be covered. Other types of lawsuits that come from real estate, contract claims. All right, so you enter into a purchase and sale agreement with a seller, and you're looking for a 75-day close, no financing contingency, just subject to the inspection contingency. And you go through this and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll close on it. Maybe I'm going to wholesale it to someone else. And during this time, you decide you want to wholesale it. Well, you're having a hard time finding a buyer for it because maybe there wasn't enough meat left on the bone, whatever the case is. So then you go back to the seller and ask him for another extension for 45 days. And so now we have this property under contract for 120 days. And then eventually you either sell it to a wholesaler, they take over, they don't close, or you can't ever find a wholesaler and you just try to walk away. And you think that your only risk of loss is your earnest money that you put down originally. Well, let me tell you this, think again. Because sellers have the ability to sue you for the decline in value of their property. Because when you tied that property up under contract, let's say that this property, I have it under contract for $250K. But over that 120 days, the property itself had declined in value, right? So it declined in value. And so now the market, since the market's depressed, it's selling for $225. All right, so that's a $25,000 loss to the seller because you agreed to buy it for $250. You didn't close. Because they had the property tied up for that length of time, they lost the ability to sell it to someone else, so they have $25,000 in damages. Does this happen? Absolutely. I have letters from real estate investors, threatening letters from attorneys, laying out all the case law on how they can go after them and sue them for these types of claims. Another thing, dog bites. So you rent out your property to a tenant who has a dog. Perfect example of this, one of my clients that I was working with, she rented out the property to this individual that had a Rottweiler. Rottweiler's chained up in the backyard. The neighbor's dog, little yipper dog, climbs over under the fence and attacks a Rottweiler. Now, what does a Rottweiler do? What they like to do, bite. So it bites a little dog, and then the neighbor runs into the backyard, climbs the fence. However, the neighbor gets in there, tries to pull the little yipper dog away and gets bit herself. They turn around and they sue my client, the owner of the property, because she rented her property to a tenant that had a vicious animal. In her policy, the Rottweiler was determined to be or listed as a vicious dog, and it's not covered. So she's on her own for those types of claims. So that's just some of them. And it's things that people who don't invest in real estate are not aware of these issues, the way in which people are going to be sued. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen so many cases where the insurance company walked away and left the client to handle the claim on their own and their defense. Don't put yourself in that situation. Use sound planning. Put your properties into limited liability companies. You still have to insure them, But by doing that, you're minimizing your overall risk of loss and keeping yourself out of being named in that lawsuit and having to rely on the insurance company to save all of your other assets. My name is Clint Coons with Anderson Business Advisors. Take care.